guys, and what's up? Welcome back. This is Ellington, and here we are back on Total War Rome 2. Now, this time, today, we're not doing a battle replay. We're going to do a little bit of kind of like an army comp, advice building, you know, how to build an army in Rome 2 Total War for for multiplayer battles, okay? And the way that we're going to do this, we're going to split up. We're going to do in like groups, okay? So today's video is going to be on the Gaelic Tribes. And then we'll move on to, other videos will be on other groups of factions that are all relatively similar to each other with slight differences to each other. So, like I said, today we are starting off with the Gaelic Tribes. Now, if you are not sure exactly what that means Arverni, Boii, Nervii, and Galatia, I believe, is involved in that as well. So, some very, very good factions in this, okay? Now, some of these factions you will not have if you do not have the Caesar and Gaul DLC, okay? It is one of the most important DLCs to have because it gives you Boii, Nervii, and Galatia. So, if you don't have that, make sure that you get it, especially if there's a sale going on. Just pop in and grab it, okay? So first off, we're going to look at some settings here, okay? So typically, we are usually playing on large funds. Every once in a while, you'll see you'll see a custom funds for 13,500, which is kind of in between large and ultra, but majority of people do prefer the large funds. Now, map-wise, you always want to make sure the whatever map you're picking is on large settlement size. And as you go through, there's going to be a lot of different maps that you will probably not play just due to them being just really either defensive heavy or just not very good maps, okay? But the map definitely plays into the army comp. So right now, we're just going to set it. Right now, I think we're on the map of Tur, I believe. Well, if we're not, we're just going to make that official that we are on Tur. So, real quick, let's go ahead and start off. We'll just start at the top of the list here with Arverni. Okay, so what you're going to see between these factions, you're going to see some very similar units between them with some slight differences here and there, okay? So, most of these factions have Oathsworn, but not all of them have chosen swords. So for Arverni is considered kind of a lower mid-tier on the barbarian faction list. These chosen swords for 720 gold, not bad stats at all here. But they are going to lose to something like a sword follower or something like a Galatian Legionary. So that's the thing about the chosen swords. They are better than most of what your Hellenic factions will be able to bring, or your Greek factions, things like that. But not quite as powerful as most of the other barbarian factions. Now, you also are given the Oathsworn. Oathsworn are 1340, 48 melee attack, 45 weapon damage, 69 melee defense. Oathsworn are a very, very, very good unit. They're considered one of the best high-tier units out there, just given what you get between your cost and the effectiveness of them. So, now typically the rules that we play with, for the most part, are 1 artillery. So I'll just go ahead and put them into the army here. 1 artillery, 4 ranged, and 2 pikes, but I can't bring pikes, so that doesn't matter. So it's usually, so if you ever go into a lobby and somebody says rules are 1, 2, 4, that is what they mean. 1 artillery, 2 pikes, 4 ranged, okay? Ranged is anything that has to do with missile infantry, missile cavalry, anything like that is your ranged units, okay? Another rule that you will typically see is max 7 of a unit, of a melee infantry unit. So that's typically specifically dealing with these guys right here. And so that means that I can bring 7 chosen swords. Let me see here. Okay, 7 chosen swords, but I cannot bring 8. Okay, but I could bring another Oathsworn. Or I could bring a naked warrior, excuse me. That is what the max 7 means. It's typically just not max, nothing more than 7 of one individual unit. What that typically prevents is something like a Tylus Tribal Warrior spam, Bowie Eye Sword Followers spam, Galatian Legionaries spam from Galatia. That is the point of those rules, okay? So, another thing Arverni gets is, so you have a couple options for the generals here. So you have an Oathsworn general. You have a Noble Horse general. Noble Horse is a pretty solid melee cav unit. Melee cav means that they don't have like super high shock charge bonus, but they can take prolonged combat better than shock cavalry can. Shock cavalry, you want to boom, get in there, then you want to get out of there and do it over and over again. Noble Horse is a melee cav, which means you can leave them in that combat a little bit longer. They also come with a Spear Noble General, which is actually not a bad spear unit at all, to be honest with you. It's actually a pretty good unit here. So something I'm going to suggest as we go into this, before I start building like an army to show you. So something I would suggest, if you're, first thing, pick your general, okay? You could always change these things, but if you're going to, let's say you're going to pick your Oathsworn, right? When you're picking further, let's say now I want to get a Noble Horse, go down to the melee cav and pick it. Don't pick from the general column. And the reason for that is it could, when you start the game, it might switch these two units. Maybe you don't want your general to be a Noble Horse. So just a good hint. Typically what I do when I'm building my army, I will go ahead and get my basis out of the way and then kind of go from there. So I'll get my 4 archers. So 4 range, that's your Gaelic Hunters. Something cool about the Gaelic Hunters, they have snipe, which means they can actually shoot while stay hidden. And they have stalk, which means they can move around and continue to be hidden. They have quick reload, which really takes their shots per minute. I think it takes it up to 12, if I remember correctly, for a brief amount of time. And then they also get flaming shot, but no heavy shot for them. Typically, I think I usually am going to go with like an Oathsworn general. Although I'll tell you right now, sometimes it's not a bad idea to go with the Noble Horse, because it allows you to get around with your general abilities a little bit faster. Okay. But typically, and then it's all going to depend also attack or defense. When you're on attack, you have more money. Okay. So I'm going to go Oathsworn. I'm probably going to go ahead and go 3 Oathsworn here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Chosen Swords. So now I have my high tiers and I have my mid tier out of the way. Now I have 840 gold. So I have a couple options here. I could do a couple Celtic Warriors. Or I could go ahead and drop an Oathsworn, bring a couple more Celtic Warriors, and a couple Levy Freemen. That puts me at a full stack army with a good amount of low tiers, good amount of mid tiers, with a decent amount of high tiers, and a couple Levy Freemen. Now, this can also change depending on who your allies are. Depending on what kind of units they can bring, you might adjust to maybe bring a bit more Oathsworn, because maybe you have an ally who can bring a bunch of mid tiers, but they can't bring any high tiers. Well, you can compensate for that by bringing extra high tiers yourself. So this is pretty standard Arverni army here, especially on attack. You have a couple Levy Freemen here to help with any sort of cavalry. Levy Freemen, they have 25 bonus versus large, only 12 melee attack, but honestly the biggest thing is they are javies. They have javelins, okay? The javies are your number 1 counter to cavalry, and so having a 210 unit with javies is great. It's great. Now, if you're going to switch to defense, things change quite a bit. Look at this. Now we're down 1160. So now you got to start losing some stuff here. It makes it where you almost wonder, can I even bring this extra Oathsworn? So I lost almost all my Celtic Warriors here, down to 2 Levy Freemen. You could do another, what did I just hit the wrong thing. Whoops. You could do another Levy Freeman if you wanted to, But there are some things you might want to adjust. Maybe you lose an Oathsworn to bring some more of those more of those Celtic warriors, excuse me. There's some things you have to adjust for here. I would probably lose Levy Freeman, bring in another Celtic warrior. You lose a spot, but that's okay. On defense, that's all right. You already have things to bonus. Arverni as a whole is a pretty good faction. Naked Warriors here have a 36 charge bonus, but the problem is 10 armor, so they are a situational unit that is not always very beneficial. They do get Savage Dogs, so a decent cav unit here. Heavy Horse is pretty good at 700. Noble Horse is a really good melee cav. But that is going to be it for the first of the barbarians, the Gaelic Tribes here. We're going to move on to the next on the list, which is Boii. Now, what you're going to see is a lot of, once again, very similar units here. So, once again, as generals, we have the Oathsworn and we have the Noble Horse, both very good units that we've already talked about. But now what we're going to change here is instead of Chosen Swords, we have the Sword Followers. Sword Followers are one of the top 3 mid-tier infantry units in the game. My top 3 in no particular order are Tribe Warriors, Galatian Legionaries, and Sword Followers. Okay, Sword Followers are just, no joke, stupidly good. They are not considered a very heavy unit. You can see by the diamond here. If you look at the Oathsworn, it's got the square. Square is a very heavy melee infantry. The diamond is the heavy melee infantry, so a little bit less armor. So, when you look at Boii, you're going to see a very similar build. The big difference is going to be in the archer comp. So, Boii, unfortunately, in the grand campaign, Boii, they do not get Gallic warriors, or Gaelic hunters, excuse me. They get the Celtic bowmen, which are a 125 range unit. They're okay. They do their job. Unfortunately, that 125 range really hurts them quite a bit. But to be honest with you, in the end, you're going to have a very similar comp here. Typically, you're going to see a couple Oathsworn here. Once again, all depending on if you're attacking, defending, it's all going to change. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Sword Followers is typically a pretty good setup there. And then from here, you actually have, look at this, quite a bit left. And that's honestly probably just due to the fact that the Celtic bowmen are cheaper than the Gaelic Hunters. So, Celtic warriors here, or the Celtic bowmen are cheaper than Gaelic Hunters. Excuse me, I misspoke there. So, on defense, this is not a bad little comp here. You got 2 Oathsworn. I like to move my stuff. I like all my stuff to be kind of near each other. You have 7 Sword Followers, 3 Celtic Warriors, and a Levy Freeman, leaving you with 70 gold to chevron something if you want. Typically 70 gold, yeah, you can get a Celtic Warrior chevroned. For the rest of their comps here, they do have, once again, pretty solid cavalry here with the Heavy Horse and the Noble Horse. Once again, both good cavalry units. If you are feeling like you want to pressure with some cavalry, Boii is not a bad faction to do it with. It just might hamper your infantry a little bit. Those Heavy Horse 700 gold is quite a bit. That is 2 Celtic Warriors right there. But in the end, once again, very similar. Now, for Boii, they do have some other little things here. They do get Axe Warriors. Nice thing about Axe Warriors, and something that could be beneficial for them, is that they do have AP damage, a good amount of AP damage. So that is something to keep in mind if you're going against a super heavy armored faction. Maybe it's not a bad idea to bring a couple Axe Warriors, but to be honest with you, it's hard to say. Sword Followers are so good, man, that it's hard to not bring them. And once again, Naked Warriors, good charge bonus, low armor. So coupled with a good archer faction, if you have a teammate that's playing a very good archer faction, Naked Warriors are not a bad unit to bring. Some good spears here. Veteran Spear's not bad. Spear Warrior's pretty good here. They both get the cavalry counter tactics, excuse me. And then once again, Levy Freeman. Celtic Skirmish is a pretty solid unit. But honestly, that's the easy thing, because once again, these two factions are so similar that it's a pretty almost carbon copy. So honestly, we're just going to move on, and I believe the next one on the list is Galatia. So Galatia here switches a lot of stuff, okay? There's going to be some similar things, but then a lot of not similar things, okay? So you do still get your noble horse general. You also then get what's called the Galatian nobleman, which is actually a really, really good spear unit. And honestly, if you're trying to save money on your army, bringing that Galatian nobleman is not a bad idea. That 250 or what? Yeah, 250, right? Yeah, 150 gold, excuse me, is actually pretty useful, you know, especially if you could save that money to spend in other places. But now we are moving on to a different unit entirely. Okay, you get this quasi mix between a like Hellenic unit and a barbarian unit, and that is the Galatian Legionaries. Okay, it is a unit that gets formation attack, gets shield wall, so a mixture of both things. You don't usually have both of those things. Barbarian units don't usually get formation attack. So an interesting thing there. They are 800 gold, but they are a excellent unit, arguably the best mid-tier unit in the game. Okay, so it is pretty easy to, when you're making a Galatia army, to just go ahead, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Galatian Legionaries. Now you are set in this thing. Okay, outside of that, you get your archers. Now, unfortunately, they only get 3 archers, but they get the mercenary Syrian archers, which are extremely good. Okay, there's only a couple factions that get Syrians. You get the Rome mercenary Syrian archers, 3 of them. Galatia mercenary Syrian archers, 3 of them. Bactria mercenary Syrian archers, 3 of them. And then finally, Seleucid gets 4 Syrian archers, not mercenaries. They can bring as many of them as they want, but the rules say 4. So 4 Syrian archers. So, starting out with the 3 Syrians, not a bad idea. Since we're right now on the defensive perspective, throwing on a Celtic Slinger as your 4th ranged unit is not a terrible move, okay? Right now, I'm just going to go ahead and go Galatian Nobleman General. You can see, at this point, I am almost done with my army, and I still have almost 2,000 gold left. So, a couple units that Galatia gets, you get your Naked Swords, which are similar to Naked Warriors, just not quite the same. Not quite, not a little bit different stats there. And then you get Galatian Swords. Galatian Swords are a solid low-tier unit, 380, a little bit more expensive than a Celtic Warrior, excuse me. So now that I've got my 7, I can go ahead and 1, 2, 3, 4. Honestly, I could probably just go right there with 5 Galatian Swords, and I'm sitting pretty. You know what I mean? This is a pretty solid Galatia army. I've got pretty much everything I need. Once again, if we switch ourselves to attackers, look at that. I've got even more money to spend. So, this opens up options. More Galatian Swords. Once again, you got to be careful, though, because with the max 7, let's see, what do we got here? 6. So, I'm at 7, and honestly, so this actually opens up to switch in to the Noble Horse General, because I have the money to spend, right? So now that I've got the money to spend, and having a Noble Horse Gen on attack is not a bad idea. It gives you a counter to any to cavalry that comes out. It helps you kind of defend your flanks a little bit better. And then I can afford now a Levy Freeman. So honestly, this is a lot, not just a lot of troops, but a lot of javelins. This is a large army, okay? You know, you are looking at a full stack army here that is going to be pretty effective on attack. But the biggest downside to Galatia, no Oathsworn. They lack that upper tier unit. To be honest with you, Galatia with a high tier unit would be probably one of the... It's already one of the best factions in the game. If they had a high tier, they would be an S tier faction along with like Rome. Alright, now that we are done with Galatia, we're going to move on to the next and final of the Gaelic tribes, that is Nervii. Nervii is going to look a lot like the first 2 factions we went over in Arverni and Boii, in the fact that we have the Noble Horse Gen, we've got the Oathsworn Gen. So same thing, you've got your Oathsworn now. Now they switch out the Heavy Horse for a Mighty Horse, which is actually a pretty darn good cav unit, man. It's actually a really good melee cav. One nice thing about the Mighty Horse, they actually get themselves Frenzied Charge, which really bumps up that charge bonus, and they pack quite the punch. So let's talk about their switched out of the mid-tiers unit. That is, if you haven't noticed, the big difference, the big change between each faction has been the mid-tier unit. So for Nervii, it is the Fierce Sword. The Fierce Sword in a field battle is extremely dangerous. In a situation where the Fierce Sword can charge into combat, but not just charge in, but be able to be cycled out for other units, Fierce Swords are extremely good. They have 37 charge bonus. The problem with Fierce Swords is that 45 armor. If you see the Fierce Swords, you're going to shoot them. They're going to die. If you don't shoot them, they're going to kill you. That is how that goes, okay? Same thing goes for the Naked Warriors, the Naked Swords. If they get in combat on you and they are left to just fight you, they will kill you. They are extremely good in melee combat, but they are very susceptible to arrow fire, okay? So, for Nervii, what you typically see, it depends on the player, but what you typically see for Nervii, a lot of people tend to give up the Fierce Sword, okay? The fact of the matter is that it is so susceptible to arrow fire that it very rarely is able to do what it needs to do, especially against good players. If you're playing against people who don't know much about these units, you could do extremely well. Going into a game with randoms and using Fierce Swords is not a bad thing. But if you're going to go up against players who know what they're doing, Fierce Swords are probably going to die. I'm not telling you not to bring them, I'm telling you to be smart about when you bring them, okay? It's like I said earlier about the Naked Swords and Naked Warriors. If you're paired with a faction, an allied faction that has really good archers, you might be able to make it work. If they can protect you from arrow fire, you might be able to pull it off, okay? So in the end, once again, you're usually going to start with your Oathsworn. What you typically see from a Nervii, especially on attack, you typically see a very large Oathsworn presence, okay? Now, Nervii also gets the Gaelic Hunters. That is a good thing, okay? Gaelic Hunters, at least they've got the 150 range, even if they don't have the best armor. Only 10 armor, which means if they do get shot, they die. They die very easily, okay? So, you typically see a very large Oathsworn presence with a large Celtic warrior presence here. Let's see, 1, 2, what do we got here? 6 now. You could probably do something like that right there. So this comp actually works extremely well, especially if you are going, let's say, paired up with, let's just say, a Seleucid who can bring a ton of, can bring a ton of infantry here, okay? Not only can they bring a ton of infantry, they actually have really good archers, right? So that pairs up really well with the mid-tiers there. You get the really good archers and the heavy armored spam mid-tier infantry of like a Seleucid, combined with the spammed Oathsworn. I say spam, but to be honest with you guys, Nervii is very hard to do anything without this, okay? If you're not going to do this, you just have to be really smart about how you play it, okay? And just expect that you may not get a gazillion kills on these guys. Another bonus to Nervii is you do get Guerrilla Swords. Guerrilla Swordsmen, once again, they do have that stock, and they have Guerrilla Deployment, which means that they can go out and they can, set up your towers to kill the defending artilleries. They can, if you're defending, you can bring them to ambush the attackers, things like that. There are options there, and the Guerrilla Sword's not a terrible unit in melee either. It's a 580 unit, which is not bad. It's not a terrible unit. The Fierce Swords, once again, just be very, very smart with them. Use them well. Be smart with communicating with your other players on how you're going to use them, where you want to go in, bring your archers to help me, things like that. Those are the things that you want to look for, okay? So, guys, have fun with the game. Go in, have a blast, play around with army comps, change things, bring different units and see how they work. But I'm just here, just trying to show you some good comps, especially if you're wanting to play competitively in Rome 2 Total War multiplayer, okay? So that is going to be it for today's setup of army comps, and that is over the Gaelic Tribes. Thank you guys so much for joining. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this video, if you liked the setup. If you want to see more, comment in the comment section. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys next time.